Hello, it's Maggie the Cheshire Crafter here. I'm making an Irish chain quilt with a few adaptations in it from a friend's 40th birthday. This video is part 2. If you haven't already seen part 1, go back and watch it. Just at the beginning of this video, I'm just going to show you what some of these recycled fabrics behind me once were in a former life. For a thread, I'm choosing a mercerised Sulco vintage thread. This number is D54, and it's one that will link in with all the threads going through the citrine, the emerald green. So just setting up my Singer heavy duty sewing machine, I've got the lime green top thread and I've loaded up 2 bobbins as well. I've changed back to a walking foot and my needle is in the midline, which lines up with this central hemline tape. I'm using my 1/4 inch magnetic guide. All seams throughout this will be 1/4 inch. My tension is on 4. My needle position is to the right. My stitch length is 4, and because I want to cut into this, I've used a short stitch length, so I've gone to a 2 and I'm using a straight stitch. I've set it up with a header and a footer, and let's start stitching. So from my recycled fabrics, I have 9 fabrics and I've cut them at 2.5 inch strips. And I'm going to make them into a 9 patch using the 2.5 strips of white cotton. To vary the blocks, I want 3 centerpieces from each of the fabrics. And to do that, I'm going to add 1 piece of fabric with 2 pieces of white. I'm going to cut this at approximately 9 inches deep. I'm going to begin sewing by taking the central fabric and attaching 1 piece of cotton to the right hand side of it, and I'm going to do that for all 9 pieces, and I'm going to pass it through the machine chain piecing. They come out as if attached on a long string. I'm now going to open them up and finger press this seam open with the fabric going underneath the coloured fabric, and for that I'm going to use my little finger press. Now, to prevent a curvature when strip sewing, I've turned this strip upside down and I'm going to do the same. I'm going to apply the white to the right hand side and start stitching on, and I'll chain piece again. Press those seams under again, but this time we're going to snip the thread between the 2 fabrics, and I'm going to store them flat. To press, add a little steam, so I've misted with water. I'm going to set the seams just by pressing the iron on top of those seams and then flip it over, but make sure that you don't stretch your fabric. Just press it. I'm just going to protect them as I store them. That's going to form the centre of my cross. I now need to create the outside edges. The X indicates patterned fabric. For this design, you need 4 fabrics of 2.5 inches each when they're cut. So you need a minimum of 10 inches plus some spare. 11 inches, possibly even 12 inches minimum. From this selection, I'll get 5 2.5 inch strips. But I want to vary it so that all the 9 patches don't look the same. And consider changing from a dark to a light, from a pattern to a coloured, from a check to a stripe. I don't particularly want too much of this next to each other, do I? And I find it helpful to pin your selections together. So I've cut 11 of those strips. I need 54 pieces of 2.5 inch when they're cut. So this will give me 55 pieces. If I was any doubt, I'd make a 12th, and they all vary slightly. Now, a word of warning here, do make sure that you have the right side of your fabric showing upwards as you're sewing. As you can see, this is the wrong side, this is the right side. It will make a difference when you come to fabrics like this one, or the broderie anglais, where you've actually got a patterned and textured surface. Right, I'm going to sew them rather like I did before, but this time to avoid me getting my pattern choices muddled up, I'm going to sew one at a time. So again, I'm going to sew on the right side of each. I'm going to sew down here, turn it upside down and add this piece to the right and complete this one and open it out before I move on to the next strip. And I'll get into the rhythm of open it out, press that seam, and then adding the other one. So when I'm going to add this one, I'm going to add right sides together of the fabric. And again, to avoid a curvature, I'm going to sew from the bottom up. So each strip will look like this. When I do them one at a time, it gives me a great opportunity to make sure I've put the fabric on right sides showing. Now, just a word about using recycled fabrics here. They're not quilting cotton. This is, the white is, but these aren't. This was from a dress. This was from a tie belt, if you remember. This is lining. If you find that you see seams or tiny holes where the stitch line has been and you've unpicked it, by the time that this is washed and steam ironed, those seams and holes will fill up and you won't notice them. If you find that you're using fabric that's really flimsy, use a starch. I'm not using directional fabrics in any of these choices, so I want you to pay special attention when working with checks, stripes or gingham, and that is to try and sew it as straight as you can. If you can get the cut as straight as you can in the first place, it will help with your sewing. And where it's not quite right, if you look really closely, the overall impression implies it's a stripe. And sometimes it would be really noticeable if you went awry. Now, I'm not entering competitions, but I think if you're entering competitions, you'd probably be marked down for it. But I'm just an amateur doing the best I can. And that's not bad, is it? Woohoo! So you'll see that because I'm using 2.5 inches, this quilt is jelly roll friendly. And if you were doing a memory quilt and you haven't been given enough to do a complete Irish chain, I've shown that you can use yardage and new fabric to make that up. And if you're on a time constraint, a little bit like I am, doing only half the 9 patches and replacing it with a batik reduces the time it takes to create the topper. I wasn't well for about 6 weeks, and I did a lot of garment unpicking while I was sitting in my chair, and I found a channel that shows romantic films. There was only so many romantic films that you can watch, and I was very glad of them, but I am glad to be getting back to my sewing machine now. On broderie anglais, it is difficult to tell the right side from the wrong side, but if you flip it over, you'll see that the right side has all the broderie in white, and on the wrong side, actually I think that's very clever how they've done that. I think they've done the broderie and then dyed it, don't you? As you can see, I've got lots of fabric left over, which means I cut far too much in the beginning. And from those edges, I've got loads of extra bits. I'm going to put those aside, probably turn those into a project liners quilt. Now they look like this. Do the same process. Set that seam, flip it over and iron. From the centre pieces, I need to cut 2.5 strips. I need 3 pieces from each to give me 27. And from the outer pieces, I need 2.5 strips. I need 5 pieces from each. I need 54. That will give me 55. So I've got 1 spare. To cut these, I'm going to use my rotary cutter and the smaller 6.5-inch square, which you'll see I've marked and placed the low tack tape on the 2.5-inch line. The first thing I've done with my fabric is lined it up across the bottom to make sure it's square, and I'm going to take that edge off. So I'm going to place that there and cut, first of all. And now I've turned my ruler upside down, which is why I've placed this edge on that cut edge, and I'm going to cut here 3 times. There is a little bit of wastage here, but not much. Right, all cut. That's scrap and that's waste. There isn't much waste, is there? Now, as you look at these, you realise that they can look different if you just place them, if you just turn them in a different way. I'm going to sit down and try and select fabrics for my 9 patches with a cup of coffee. Now sew together as a 9 patch. If you've ironed your seams in the correct way, those seams will nest together. Now press. You'll find that those seams want to go outwards. Set those seams, turn it over and press. I've laid it out on my bed. This is going to be 9 rows across and 12 columns. And this is just, I can only fit, I've got a double bed, but this will only fit 8. But it just gives you an idea of the design, so that the Irish chain will come across on a diagonal, and then the batik will come across on a diagonal. And what I must ensure is that I've mixed around enough the 9 patches so I don't get too many darks or patterns, designs touching each other. And I've just lost something from here. So like that, that's too similar. Let's turn it round to that, and that works. And the other thing now I must do, because I now need to do another 4 rows, I'm going to photograph this, and I'm also going to test it in grayscale. So let me see what that looks like. And Eagle Eyes should spot that I had this one wrong. So it should go across as a diagonal, which it now does. I'm quite happy with how that looks. Before I move anything, I've marked each row with a post-it note, and I'm going to pin that post-it note on and pin those patchworks across onto a safety pin so I can safely move them into the kitchen without losing my pattern design. And here are the final row 9 to 12. My back's aching now. I've done enough for today. I think I'm going to end this video here. What I need to do next time is complete the topper and quilt it, which I hope to do within a week, and I'll show you hopefully next weekend. The other thing is I need to consider how to bind this, and my choices are using some of the batik or this darker teal colour. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. So for now, this is a tired and hungry Maggie saying thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe so you won't miss part 3, and come back and see me soon, won't you? Bye.